Hello my friends. In this video we are going to be doing an introduction to meditation and a series that we will have on different ways that you can meditate. So stay tuned and we will talk about the basics. Now, if you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you have some kind of an interest in meditation, and it's something that, while I don't profess to be any sort of an expert in, I have had a fair amount of experience with it. And this is primarily just talking to people, doing meditation on my own. It's part of my normal daily routine. It's usually the first thing I do after I get up in the morning, as I spend some time meditating. And I've had a lot of different insights about that. I've heard a lot of different ways you can meditate. I've experimented with a lot of different ways of meditation. So my hope through this series is just to share some of those different methods, different insights related to meditation, and hopefully give you a toolbox that you can use to start experimenting with it on your own. There's a few things that I want to make sure that we're addressing before we jump into this. Number one, in my mind, meditation is something that's a lot like going to the gym, and that is to say that you have to kind of make it a routine and you have to consistently do it if you want to see effects from it. If you want to have any sort of positive results, if you want to be doing it consistently, it's got to be a habit. It's got to be part of your routine. Just as with the gym, if you don't go to the gym or you just kind of go once every couple months, you're not going to see any results from that. In the same sense with meditation, if you're not doing it on a regular basis, I don't think you're going to see any positive effects. So just make sure that you have found a time in your schedule when you can make it routine, even if it's a short period during the middle of your workday, or if it's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning or the last thing you do before you go to sleep. Just find a place that you can park it and do it reasonably consistently so that you're going to see some of those benefits. Another thing that seems to be a hot button question for a lot of people when I'm talking about meditation is how much time do you spend doing it? And this is going to vary a lot. And I've changed a lot in terms of how much time I'm spending on it. When I first started, it was like 5-minute stretches. And if you are just beginning at it, my recommendation would be to start with just a simple 5 minutes. It's a really easy amount of time. It doesn't take anything to sit there for 5 minutes and go just do whatever routine you're going to do. But as you start to get used to it, that's going to seem like absolutely nothing. And so you're going to want to amp up your time just so you can start to feel some of the benefits of going through the process. And a lot of the meditation types, you can't really even get into it in just 5 minutes. There's a lot of things where it takes me 20 minutes before I can start shutting my brain off so that I can do the actual meditation. So start low if you haven't done this before, just so you don't scare yourself off, because if you say, I'm going to sit here for 3 hours, like, you're probably going to do it once and never come back to it. But once you've kind of done it a few times at a small amount of time, increase a little bit incrementally and sort of figure out where you are. For a while, I had increased my time up to an hour, and then I ended up kind of ratcheting back to half an hour just because the hour was consuming so much of my morning when I was doing it. So within a half an hour span, I generally feel pretty good when I'm done. I never have the feeling of like, oh God, why am I sitting here? I still have like 25 more minutes, I bet, or half an hour. But it's also enough time that I feel like I can really get into it. But you don't have to limit yourself to that. Just experiment with different times. And again, if you haven't done it before, just start really low. As I had indicated, there are a lot of different ways that you can meditate. When I first started meditating, I had only been told one way, and I kind of did that and nothing else. And since then, I've learned there are a ton of different ways you can meditate, and some of them even balance each other out. But I would encourage you to try different things and don't just limit yourself to one thing all the time. But there are a lot of different paths you can use, a lot of different sort of mental tricks. Some of them build on the same basic concepts as others. So kind of go through, pick and choose what seems relevant to you. I'd encourage you to experiment with all of these, but don't feel like you have to be limited to any one of them either. In terms of the general form, for most of the meditations, what I do is pretty much the same thing. So I will generally sit in a reasonably comfortable spot. I like to have a pillow a little bit underneath my rear so that it's pushing me up a bit, but not that I'm actually sitting on it. So my personal ideal is to get my body in a position where I feel like I'm kind of sitting up straight, where my spine is kind of straight, but not so much that it feels very forced. And part of the problem there is that if you are holding yourself really tight, like rigidly, then after a few minutes you're going to get exhausted, and then you're just going to want to droop, which is not ideal for going through the process. So one of the things that I often tell myself is, okay, try to get into a straight position, but then relax everything that I don't need to maintain that position. And that's kind of the ideal state. Having myself propped up a little bit on a pillow, just in the very back of where I'm sitting, is helpful to me. If you want to get in a chair or something with a backer, that's fine. Sometimes people run into pain, as they're sitting there. So do whatever you need to do to kind of sit in a comfortable position, even if that's on a couch or whatever. But just try for most of these, unless we say otherwise during the description of the meditation, for most of these, just sit reasonably straight in a comfortable position. Another important element to your meditation is breathing. Now, you don't have to worry too much about it. In fact, when you're going through the meditation process, most of the time you don't want to be thinking about your breathing, is my personal opinion. The only thing I would recommend to you is to make sure that you're taking very complete breaths and not rushing through it. If you're just having kind of a very shallow breaths, something like that, then take longer, deeper breaths. Just make sure that it's very complete. You're allowing your entire body to oxygenate. I will generally stop after each component of the breath. So take a deep inhale, push the air down into your center. By center, I mean slightly below your navel, and then hold it there for a couple seconds. When you start to feel like you've hit about kind of your maximum, then slowly exhale it. So hold. So you're taking kind of a long exhale on that whole thing. You're gonna have to find a breathing rhythm that fits you. So the one that, if I give you a count, it's not gonna quite work for me. You don't wanna be thinking about the count, generally speaking, when you're in there. So you might wanna just practice for a few seconds doing the generic breathing. And you can think while you're going through this practice how long you're taking for each of these elements. But once you get into the actual routine, you wanna kind of get rid of the thought and just maintain the pattern that you've established. Another important thing related to the meditation is the environment that you're in. Like, where are you picking to do this? For me personally, I have a really hard time if there's a lot of distractions, kind of honing in on what it is that I'm trying to think about, or eliminating my head from going to the distractions. Now, we'll see in certain things like the mindfulness, as we'll talk about a little bit later, you can use some of those distractions as part of your meditation and part of the practice in dealing with things that are outside of you and not letting them impact you. But in a general sense, what I would do is try to find a place where you're not hearing lots of noise. So do what you can to find a spot and a time where you're not going to hear tons of noise around you. If one of the things I try to do is get up before everyone else in my house does, because that way nobody's awake or making noise and I can just sit there and do my thing without any additional distractions. But whatever you can do to sort of minimize some of those, especially when you're just starting this whole practice, do that. Right along with the environment component is the lighting. Now, for most of the meditations I do, I actually try to reduce the amount of light that is around me. So number one, and in part because of these distractions. Number two, I think there's an actual physiological change in certain meditations that you're doing, and I'm not gonna go into this right now, but it can really help in terms of melatonin production. My personal preference is to go with low light. Again, you can experiment with this stuff, try some different scenarios. It's easiest to do it early in the morning for me because it's the darkest at that time, but here again, just find something that's going to work out for you, experiment with different things, and see what's going to work best. And the last thing I will offer you before we kind of jump into the specifics of how to do each of these meditations is, in terms of your mind, don't go in with expectations. I feel like I am most disappointed at the times where I go in and I think, I'm gonna have this magical, surreal experience when I go into this meditation, and then I just don't. If you go in to any given meditation and just say, okay, I'm gonna accept whatever this is, whatever happens, that's cool, those are the times when I always have the more interesting experiences. And even if you don't, there are things that you can get out of the meditation process itself that on some days just seem very basic. It's just, okay, I feel better. There might not be some magical thing that's happening inside your head, but you just go in and you have a better feeling that you're walking away with. So I would highly encourage you not to go in wanting something. If you really want to, have all sorts of hallucinations or whatever it is, then you're probably not going to. Just kind of accept what's there, you might have hallucinatory experiences. You might have all sorts of crazy things. You might see visions, but whatever it is, even if you don't have that, just accept it. Be okay with what it is and see where it takes you. And you're gonna have a far more interesting experience through any of the meditation types if you approach it from that mindset. With all of that said, I hope you enjoy these, and like I said, just go through, experiment with different ones. The first one we're going to talk about is mindfulness in the next video here, but just try out different things and see what's going to provide benefit to you. And if you haven't already done this, please check out the resources on my website, which is www.embuffination.com. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is Emotional Embuffination. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next video. The first thing I do when I finish meditating is I journal, and I use this, my reality generator, which is full of guided prompts. It's also full of free journaling, and this will help you to reinforce the concepts that you're working on when you're meditating. So check it out. You can learn more at embuffination.com or myrealitygenerator.com.